Hello, and thank you for tuning in to another broadcast. We want to welcome everyone, and we want you right now to take the time to click the share button and share this with all of your followers. We are on YouTube also and on Facebook, so welcome, welcome, welcome. And those who are joining by Zoom, we want to welcome you. And once again, thank you for attending another broadcast by Events and Excellence and Productions. And we are here talking about a courageous conversation by these wonderful men that are here with us on today. And I'm not going to prolong the time, but I'm going to turn it over to Kim Milton-Mackey as she takes it further in this broadcast.
All right, welcome everyone to an hour of power. We may go over a little bit, hopefully not. Anybody that knows me know that I'm a time stickler. Want to welcome each and every one of our viewers today, whether on Facebook, YouTube, or also Zoom. I have the privilege and honor to work with each one of these gentlemen here, and I am not going to take a lot of time because I want to hear what they have to say. So I'm going to start off by just giving a small bio. Of course, their bios are so lengthy, and like I've said before, what these young men have done cannot fit into a bio or to a paragraph, so it's not meant to do them any harm, but just to let our audience know who is before us. We have Controller Greg Todd. He began with Ingham County on August the 17th, 2020. He is a newbie, came in, this is not in his bio, but he came in with his hands up, ready to work, all right? And because Andy put him to work, okay, I'll put that one in there. Prior to becoming Ingham County Controller, Greg was the Deputy Secretary of Operations for the Maryland Department of Health. He served as Queen Anne's County, Maryland County Administrator also. Greg graduated from Kansas State and received an MBA from Phoenix University. Greg and his wife, Cindy, have two daughters, Paige, 22, and also Abby, 18. Greg's wife, Cindy, is a Director of Planning with Spicer Group in East Lansing, Michigan. Welcome, Greg Todd. All right, next we have Andy Bout. Listen, this is my brother from another mother, all right? Just so the audience knows, we stay into it, but in the end, we get along. Andy Bout is the undersheriff at Ingham County Sheriff's Office. In addition, Andy is the owner of MACNLOW Associates, Public Safety Training and Consulting. Andy also proudly serves as the co-chair, actually he is chairing the Ingham County Culture, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, and is enjoying his 28th year of public service. Prior to his law enforcement, he looks so young, it's even hard to believe, that Andy actually served as United States Marine. Andy is married to Trish, and they have 6 sons, a basketball and football team. Welcome, Andy. All right. Lastly, but not least, Ryan. Ryan is certainly another brother of mine. He is, before I get into his bio, I just wanted to let you know, he has been the fire behind a lot of things that are happening that you'll hear on tonight. Ryan is the chairperson of the Board of Trustees at Lansing Community College. Among his notable leaderships in DEI space, Ryan spearheaded the passage of LCC's resolution addressing racial injustice through DEI in June of 2020. The resolution required the college to adopt an equity action plan to address inequities in student success, employment, and college public safety department. Ryan was elected in 2016 to a 6-year term, which concludes at the end of 2020. Welcome, Ryan Buck. All right, so we're going to get right into it. We're going to have our panelists to open up with an opening statement. They'll get a couple minutes to do that, and we'll go right in order. We'll do Ryan first, Andy, and then we'll do Greg. Have at it.
Thank you, Kim and Greg. Thank you for hosting us this evening. Those who forget history are doomed to repeat it. And as LCC's current president, Dr. Stephen Robinson, likes to say, we have to look in the mirror when it comes to DEI work. It's through that lens that I participate in tonight's forum. And I think having a panel such as this, 3 white men, has to be acknowledged because it was intentional.
Yep.
Because tonight's discussion includes where white people, cisgender males, fit in the DEI salad. By no means do I speak for white men, but I can offer my personal experiences in the hopes of inspiring other white men, indeed white people, to join us on the DEI journey. And that's just it. It's a journey. It's towards understanding and ultimately acceptance. In addition to what Kim shared in my intro, I wanted to make sure that I also wanted to share that I'm also a member of the Ingham County Cultural Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Committee with Under Sheriff Bauk and Controller Todd. And that's part of my day job with Ingham County Clerk Barb Byram's office. Clerk Byram and I both serve on that committee. My focus tonight will be where higher education, and indeed all of education, can be a partner in fostering better DEI efforts, including in the area of policing. Look forward to tonight's forum. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Ryan.
All right. Thank you, Kim. Thank you all there in the virtual world for having me tonight. It's my pleasure to join you this evening. Myself, Ingham County Sheriff's Office, Sheriff Scott Rigglesworth, we're happy to have a seat at this virtual table tonight. I was reminded earlier this week that proximity, being close, repeated contact creates comfort, and distance creates some fear. So I'm glad to be here and start working on that contact and closeness with other members of the community and the virtual community tonight. I'm in the service business. I'm in the people business. And I'll start by saying I may not always look like you. The men and women in law enforcement and corrections may not always look like you when we put on our uniforms and different duty gear, but we are you. We're members of the community. We're your baseball coach. We go to your same church. We shop at the same grocery store. We're citizens and police officers. And that's one of the principles of policing, is that the police are the community are the police. So you recognize us. We're the most visible form of government when we have our stuff on, but when we're not, we blend into the community because we're part of the community as well. So happy to be here. Might come across some tough stuff. This is courageous conversations, but that's okay. Public safety is a prerequisite to prosperity. So me and those like me play a role in making this all work as a great nation, as a great state, as a great county, as a great city, and everything involved in that. So thanks a bunch for the invite. And it's always a pleasure to work with Greg D and Ryan and Greg and Kim. So here we go. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, Kim and Greg. Thank you for putting this on. When I first saw the flyer that Kim put together, I told her we look like the bizarro world of Charlie's Angels. So we might not be the prettiest to look at. So, you know, if you're listening in, you're probably to the advantage here. But we are happy to be here. I'm happy to be here. As Kim said in the introduction, I'm a newbie to Ingham County. I've spent time in Michigan in the past, so I was happy to get back to Michigan, but had not been here for about 20 years. Wow. I've been in local government and state government for the past 20 years and honestly did not deal a lot with diversity and equity issues where I came from. So this was refreshing for me. And it was I was happy that the commissioners were very committed to it. And I was very happy when I found the Ingham County Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion group, and it's been my pleasure to work with them and the gentleman and everyone else that is involved in it. So I'm excited about tonight. I'm looking forward to getting into the questions. So I'm going to turn it back to Kim.
All right, thank you so much for everybody getting to know a piece of what I know about all you gentlemen on tonight. We're going to get right to our first segment. That's going to talk about. We're going to share things surrounded around what happened at the Capitol. And so, Greg, I want to ask you, there's an attempt by some to alter the narrative surrounding the January 6th Capitol insurrection. About 140 officers were injured in the Capitol riots. How do you feel about a special commission being appointed to help investigate how the invasion really happened?
Yeah, thank you, Kim. I would support that. I think the first thing that we really need to look at as a society is how can a president of our United States claim an election as fraudulent and get millions of people to support that claim when there's no evidence for it. So that's really where this started. How did we get to the point where we had, our nation's capital was full of, quite frankly, angry, white men and women being led by an angry white man, and moved to do what they did that day while the president at the time went back into his room and watched it on TV and did not lead them. He never led them in anything except for their own misguided actions. So I think that's the first thing we need to do. How do we get to this point to where what is the freest election and the most honest election in the world, that it can be questioned to the point that we instigated that much turmoil over it? So that would be my first question, the first thing we need to look into. I do think, I think, and I know this question comes up later with regard to the racial mix of the participants and previous ones, but I do think, it was, folks did not anticipate that, this type of event could arise with what they saw as probably a bunch of middle-class white folks, quite frankly. And, I think it just goes to show that mob mentality is easy to start and very, very difficult to end. And that's what we saw that day, was the mob mentality of how do we address that in the future? So yes, back to the question, I fully support that. I think that the narrative should be as clear as it seems to be getting. And, you see it's funny, the defense you hear that, they were misled by their leader. Well, hell yeah, they were, but he'd been doing that for 4 years. So I'm not really sure what anyone expected on that. So I think I've got 30 seconds left. So yes, I would support it. I think it needs to go a little bit deeper though than just the events on that day, but how we got to that day.
Okay. Thank you so much, Greg. And just so our viewers know that once we are done with the segment, if you have any questions, we'll definitely try to get to them if our panelists choose to answer them. All right, Andy, more than a dozen U.S. Capitol police officers are under internal investigation for alleged helping with the rioters. Why do you think so many law enforcement groups were involved in planning or coordinating the breach of the Capitol? Oh.
There we go. Technology. After a year and a half, you think I'd be used to unmuting myself.
Right.
I'll start with the involved in planning part. Law enforcement is an honorable and noble profession. I personally find it hard to believe that there were police officers, Capitol police officers, DC Metro police officers that were actually involved in planning that insurrection at the Capitol. A shameful day in American history occurred that day. But I personally, until I learn otherwise, and I don't work for the Capitol Police, you know that, I'm not a DC Metro cop. I think they were overwhelmed that day. I think if anything, they were, my opinion, failed by their leaders. There's a huge intelligence mechanism in law enforcement. I don't think anybody saw this coming. And if they did, I don't think they shared it with the right people. And if they shared it with the right people didn't equip the officers that were holding the line that day with the right equipment. So I think there's a failure, again, my opinion, I don't know all the facts. There was a failure in intelligence, a failure in leadership. And to a certain extent, the officers, and I keep up on national events and local events, there was a series of conduct violations that occurred by some of these officers. There's allegedly. Officers, corrections officers, law enforcement officers in this country are held to a higher standard than the average citizen. There's an expectation that they do it right every single time. They take an oath, and I said before, it's an honorable and noble profession. Different circumstances, but I've stood on riot lines before. I said earlier in the day, there's police are citizens, citizens are the police. Unless it's violent, there's always going to be police-citizen interaction. There's pictures taken. I remember posing for pictures with people on the other side of the riot line, in the city of Lansing, in the city of East Lansing. The police are that line that represents no one other than civility in society. So I think some of these officers at the Capitol are being looked at for conduct violation, taking pictures with people that had Make America Great hats again on, and various conduct violations. Officers know their code of conduct. Officers know their agency's policies and procedures, but I have a hard time believing that they knowingly and willingly participated in an insurrection of the Capitol of the United States of America. The men and women in this country are better than that. I think they were overwhelmed, and at some point, because they didn't have the right intel, they didn't have the right equipment, they didn't have the right numbers of officers to hold the line, that the line broke, and then bad things happen. And whether it's a cop or a citizen of this country, I'm a big fan of personal accountability. Those that went in were wrong. If any law enforcement officer in this country aided and abetted that, they're wrong. Bad things happened that day. We as a nation, we as a profession will recover. I'm confident it'll never happen again. I wish we could get into peaceful protests again. That's what this country allows. That's what's acceptable. And I'll stay in that line any day. We can all disagree, but at the end of the day, we're all brothers and sisters. We're all citizens of the United States of America, the greatest country on the face of God's green earth. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. I think we got a couple people that are chiming in on that one.
Okay.
So they came to the right person, because Andy will get you told.
That's it.
All right. We'll come back to you. Ryan, suicides have occurred, resignations have occurred. How does that make you feel about those who are supposed to protect and serve our country?
I believe most in law enforcement, if not all, are put into a very tough position, doing their jobs, being good teammates, community partners, and going home alive each and every day. It's already an incredibly difficult profession to begin with. And to your question, I think suicides and resignations are indicative of a law enforcement system that's fraught with systemic weaknesses, not enough resources, not enough accountability, and a country so polarized that it's nearly impossible to see any real change happen. The result of that are the deaths for those in uniform and those out of it. But I think also a fundamental question for young people is whether they should consider the career to begin with. Really want to go through with it and put on the badge. And we're creating a system where more and more the answer is likely no. It is easy to become disheartened by all that is going on. And I can only imagine what devastation the families of Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and so many others are going through. But I definitely think one step is to have these conversations and keep the conversations going. I mean, when incidents hit the news cycle, it's the hot button issue and everyone is talking about it. What happens when the news cycle moves on? We need to keep the conversation going, even when many want to move their attention to something less controversial. I think that's how we evolve into action. We build an authenticity of purpose, that we are doing what we said we were going to do. I think a great example of that, I'm going to self-plug LCC's DEI resolution. We're looking to pass our $125 million budget on Monday. We're allocating an additional $300,000 in monies to DEI work, approximately $300,000. And that's just in next fiscal year. So LCC is trying to move the needle. And I hope that what LCC is doing will inspire other units of government to continue this conversation and move it into actual action.
Thank you. Thank you. I had one question. I just got a question that there were actually a police officer who is currently a police did just recently got arrested for being at the Capitol. So with that being said, Andy, just like you were saying, I guess your response was, if you had proof that an officer was there, you would have hard time believing that. And so the individual just wanted you to know that just like you said, even though I would have, do you have anything else you want to say on that before we move on?
Yeah, I guess I put my hand up, not on that, but I'll respond
Okay.
to that as well. That's unfortunate, but as I mentioned earlier, I mean, I can't, we're held to a higher standard. We should not break the law. A lawman or
Right.
a woman should not break the law.
Right.
Choose to do that, you're held accountable
Right.
by the criminal justice system, just like everybody else in this country.
Right.
That damages our entire profession.
Yeah.
So that's unfortunate.
Thank you.
Due process, right of that's all going to happen, and I can't defend that. What I wanted to comment on was the suicides post-event, the stress of that.
Yeah.
That to me, and again, I don't know the fact pattern. It's a stressful job.
Yeah.
When you fail your mission, when you don't do your job, I mean, there's a history lesson here. The
Yeah.
term "fall on your sword" from ancient samurai warriors, when they fail at their job, when they did not represent the emperor or the kingdom or the country well, death before dishonor. They would rather fall on their sword
Wow.
than to face the consequences. And it's not easy doing this job. There's a lot. These are honorable, prideful men and women that want to hold that line. And when they fail, bad things happen. And in any segment of society, when people feel like a failure, unfortunately, they take their own life. This profession is not exempt from world things, life happening, stress.
Right.
So unfortunate anytime anyone takes their life.
Wow. I really do appreciate this segment because like you said, you actually work in a position to where you actually see this firsthand. A lot of people see one side, but they don't see all the things that, you know, the officers have to go with, the family, dealing with all these things and so forth like this. So I think it's good for us to share, you know, what it's really like so people can get a real good grasp on, you know, these jobs aren't easy to fill, especially in this day and time. And with us being overworked and things like that, when we finish, like you said, we're all human. So hopefully with this segment, someone will take that back and have a little more empathy for those who work in public service.
And thank you. That's part of this. Empathy is a big part of it. And we try to be very empathetic in law enforcement and understand where the other shoes. We say that all the time. I always encourage people, if you want to see what it's like, we're one of the only professions that makes house calls, and you can come with us and watch. We do ride-alongs. I would encourage anyone to come do a ride-along, day shift, night shift, city, out county. It's a little complex right now in the COVID environment, working through it, but it goes back to the police out of the citizens out of the police. There's really no secrets here. So I'll challenge you, Kimberly Milton-Mackey.
All right.
Let's go spend some time in a car someday.
Oh, you ain't saying nothing but a word.
I'll show you what I do for a living, or hook you up with the right man or woman that does it, because this is what I do now. I sit behind a desk, but I've got stories and I've got experience. And
okay, Andy, we're gonna move on because we got some good tasty stuff here. Thank you all. The next segment we're gonna continue to talk about police reform. We just got off a little bit, but Ryan, you're going to be first up. You got so many minutes. I'll read both the questions, dive in them, however you want to dive in them. And this is a really, really hot topic. Defunding the police is as much about messaging as it is about resource prioritization. Do you think the phrase is being used to strengthen anti-equity measures? Question one. Then there is a debate about whether funding the police has made our society even safer. This is especially true for persons of color who are overwhelmingly at the receiving end of police officer violence. How do communities of color come to trust the police, and how do police earn that trust?
So I'll take the questions in the order you gave to me. For defunding the police, one word answer is yes. That phrase, defunding the police, was a gift to so many campaigns and fundraising initiatives who would oppose law enforcement reform, who would push out a very right of center agenda. I can vividly recall in the last election cycle, a campaign commercial where someone was calling the police, and all you saw in the commercial was an answering machine popping up saying, "No one is here because the police have been defunded."
Yeah.
Hands over to like a riot scene.
Yeah.
And of all the commercials I saw last election season, that's the one that sticks in my mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, resource reprioritization would maybe be a better description of what I think that phrase means. But I mean, I have to be honest, it's easy for me to armchair quarterback from this side of things. So it's unfortunate defunding the police is now that phrase that's probably going to live on for years, but hurting those initiatives that defunding the police is really discussing. I mean, one good example of resource reprioritization is I understand that the Lansing Police Department has added a social worker to their police force. And I know Under Sheriff Bao can speak more to this, but Ingham County Jail is putting out more programming to aid in anti-recidivism efforts. But to your other question about really building bridges between communities of color and law enforcement, and how does law enforcement build or earn trust? I think where you can start is strengthening hiring practices. The police force should reflect the diversity of the community it serves. I mean, for me, the moment I find out someone is part of the LGBT plus community, my community, there's a certain level of trust that is immediately created. Whether that's appropriate or foolhardy, I don't know, but you can't tell me it's not true. I also think policing needs to be inside the community, and there has to be opportunities for the police and communities of color to come together in circumstances that we don't typically think of. The undersheriff brought up ride-alongs. That is a very different exposure to what policing is than what you'd see in pop culture, like Cops, the TV show Cops. At LCC, we've built a robust curriculum with our Mid-Michigan Police Academy that includes building cultural competencies for communities of color. We have a lot more to do, but I think it's a really great start.
Oh, all right. Thank you, Ryan. That was a short answer, but there's certainly a lot in it, though.
Does that mean there's time for more Andy on that?
Yes.
Just
Yeah,
asking.
yes, Andy, go ahead.
There's never time for more Andy.
Right.
I go back to public safety, police, fire, corrections is a prerequisite to prosperity. Without some sense of law and order, without a sense of justice, there is no justice. So I just caution you, if we want to defund, I don't like those words either. Reallocate resources, I'm good with that. But if you're going to reallocate resources / defund the police, you best fund those resources and get them in place before you just remove funding from law enforcement. Because what we're dealing with right now is we're seeing the police do what everyone else has failed to do. Substance abuse care, mental health disorders, housing, truancy. These are all non-traditional law enforcement functions. But where we are right now is someone's having mental health crisis, call the police. Someone has substance abuse or co-occurring offenses, substance abuse and mental health, call the police. There's a homeless problem because there's no housing, call the police. There's a vagrant on the corner or someone selling drugs because they don't have a job, call the police. So I said earlier, we make house calls. You call, we'll come. I just caution you. I'm afraid, really, truly, as an individual and as a police, I'm afraid for the country if we strip police funding and men and women that deeply care about their communities aren't out there of what could occur. And I say I'm afraid because I've already seen it when you disparage law enforcement, and we retreat even a little bit, there's an increase in violent crime across this country in major cities and in small towns, because we're just not there, because we're a little bit shy to do enforcement, and that's our job. So we do the best we can. We're imperfect human beings, but we're the police. You called, I told you earlier, we're in the service business, we're in the people business. We'll do the best we absolutely can on every single call for service. But be careful. We'll always be there, but it takes money, resources, personnel, equipment, training. And we do it a lot better now than we did in 1782 and 1840 and 1930 and 1960. We do it better now than we did in 2020. We continue to
Okay.
work as a profession.
Thank you, Andy. Before I want you to put this out there, because you made a statement, you know, you're afraid for the country. How about the minorities that are afraid of the police? I think that's where, you're afraid for the country, they're afraid for their lives, The question was, how do you bring that back in? But so don't answer that now, because I gotta get to the next question. But get that out there, because I do want to make sure that we stay in that, because that's part of the problem. You got somebody afraid, and then somebody that says that we're here for protect. So Andy, police reform, the collective bargaining agreements make it virtually impossible to discipline bad actors, and also give officers accused of misconduct the ability that no other worker receives. Please help us understand how the Fraternal Order of Police, the National Association of Police Organization, and the Internal Association of Chiefs of Police work. That's one. Exploring the nation's history of policing. What will it take to overhaul a system seen as rife with misconduct and institutional racism?
I'll start with the FOP and the IACP and a lot of acronyms in my job. IACP, International Association of Chiefs of Police, around the country. These are, think of those organizations as like the American Medical Society. It's professionals sharing information. So at a national and international level, we're talking about policies and procedures, best practices based on your geographical area. You break that down, and I'll make it a little more Michigan specific. You have the MACP, Michigan Association of Chiefs of Police, and the MSA, the Michigan Sheriff's Association. Our organization is members of both, same type of thing. It's sharing information, best practices, policies, and procedures. When you get to the actual agency level, in the law enforcement supervisors and corrections officers, collective bargaining agreements or union contracts. We have these things in place, and I won't get into it. I'm not a labor law expert, but Act 312 is what it's specific to public safety, fire, police, corrections. Act 312 prohibits those employees from going on strike. They're so valuable to public safety that they can't go on strike, because if they did, bad things would happen in our communities. Unlike, it's a GM town. GM goes on strike or something like that. Picket lines are set up, production stops. We can't stop doing what we're doing. So our collective bargaining agreements have what is 312 eligible, meaning they can't go on strike. So we have an arbitrator that rules on whatever the issue is that we disagree upon. The arbitrator makes a decision that's binding arbitration. If I'll use the example that's relevant. If we try to discharge an employee, or if we are arguing over a wage increase, we say no, they say yes. Labor management is the we and they. An arbitrator can come in and make a decision so we don't ever go on strike. So we say no, we don't think they need a 3% wage increase, but the union says they do. The arbitrator can say, no, you're going to get a 1.5% increase, or labor's right, they get 3, or they get nothing. So, but a union contract is a lot more than that. I made quick notes today on things that fall in a union contract. And if you're not in a union or a 312 eligible unit, these things would appear in like a employee handbook. It covers your wage scale, vacation time, holiday time, promotional procedure, management rights, uniform, what your work hours are. It's like an employee handbook, but in this profession, if labor and management disagree, an arbitrator can make the decision. In discipline, I mean, this is what we're talking about here, police conduct. Discipline and a grievance procedure is a big part of that. I said earlier, accountability. At the sheriff's office, if we learn of a violation, investigate a violation, have to take action on a violation, SJC, swift, just, and consistent is how we apply discipline. We don't sit on it, we don't wait. We do it as fast as we can, but still use due process for all parties involved. So we make a swift decision, it's a just decision, it's consistent with the way it's dealt with otherwise. If the employee disagrees, they're still bound by this binding arbitration and labor agreement. They can have what we call an arbitration, where it's like court, where the arbitrator is the judge, labor is one defense, or labor is the prosecutor, the employee is defense, and the arbitrator makes the decision. So it's the big thing here is that binding arbitration, that it's not always up to the sheriff's office of who gets terminated, what level of discipline they are, because of these contracts that prevent employees from going on strike, representing their interests. We can't, think about what happened if the jail went on strike and there was no one there to control, help, assist, feed, provide medication, medical services to the inmate population. We can't strike. So there's where binding arbitration and the grievance procedure comes in. Did that help?
Yeah, but let me just kind of follow up with a sample really quick. If you have an officer that continues to have violations of continuing to be in communities of color, and people of color have made so many complaints, 20 complaints about an officer and about, rough treatment or what have you, like all these things that are in place, that they never can be fired, they never can be disciplined. So that's kind of where we were just trying to see at what point, since the unions are so strong, I guess officers can pretty much get away with doing whatever they want with all the complaints in place, because you have all these kind of systems in place. So that was a thing, is how can we, like in the system itself, so that trust factor can be there. You know what I'm saying? If
I understand
so
completely.
Complaining about officers. So
yeah, and I'll start with this. It's not, you can get terminated for the first offense, but we also, in these contracts, it talks about progressive discipline based on the severity of offense, the frequency of the offense. It gets progressively worse. So I'll just walk you through a minor offense. Not even, I'm just talking a minor, like, hey, you wore the wrong shoes. Okay. Teach, coach, mentor. Hey, we provide boots for you. You're required to wear those. Don't do that again. Citizen complains you're rude. We investigate that. We watch the video. We watch everything, and we say, hey, you know what? That was a violation of our policy and procedure, officer conduct. You're supposed to teach people with dignity and respect. First offense, non-use of force related. You may get a verbal warning on that. We expect more from you. Let's refer back to our expectations. Let's refer back to our code of conduct, policy, and procedure. So you start with that verbal warning. They do it again, we keep track of this. Oh, you did it again. I told you once. Now you're going to feel it a little more. You're getting a written reprimand for your verbal misconduct. It happens again. Now we're looking at discipline where we're talking about suspension. So it's progressive discipline. But if the first offense is so egregious that you can't do that, you're a lawman or woman, it's against policy and procedure, it shocks someone's conscience, your conduct, we can move to terminate right there. And so it's progressive. It's, I don't want to make it simple, but it's like dealing with kids.
No, I think kind of we've got it. But so there, at least in Ingham County, there is a process that you all look at seriously, and you all look at the violations serious, and there is disciplinary action that
is absolutely. And again, these are all things that if you want to know more, come spend a day with the undersheriff. I'll show you the book. I'll tell you what we do. It's
Okay, Andy, we're gonna get back. We're gonna get back to you. We can do this all night. Okay, Greg. Greg, looking at the images caught on the various news stations and social media outlets comparing law enforcement handling of the 2020 Black Lives Matter protests versus the Capitol riots, what were the differences? One, is the use of race by police and citizens to justify surveillance, harassment, and other symbolic forms of violence against Blacks the most immediate problems to address?
Yeah, thanks, Kim. So I'll take the first question. I'll take them in order. So yes, there were definitely differences, and I think the main reason for that was the implied or perceived risk of a large gathering of African Americans who are not happy with the way things are going in our nation's capital, as opposed to what was really more of an ad hoc group of angry white people in our nation's capital. And it really was that simple. Let's think, from a cultural perspective. I think the decision was made which group is more dangerous or which group is more prone to take some sort of action. And it was perceived that it would be the group of African Americans that were there instead of the group of white people. So that's where the breakdown was, is there's, in a perfect world, the response is the same for both. But it wasn't in this case. And it wasn't in this case because, quite frankly, Washington, D.C. is, our capital's the majority white. They perceive, that there could be some violence there. So let's do something about it. Let's make sure we're overly prepared, as opposed to, the president's going to come out and he's going to complain that the election was stolen, and we're going to have some predominantly white citizens down here. So let's not worry about it that much because it's not going to be that big of a deal. Well, it turned out to be a huge deal, and it turned out to be a huge deal because, as Andy said earlier, there was a failure in intelligence and a breakdown there, and the response, should have been the same in any situation. And the scapegoating right after it happened, that there was groups of Blacks that were instigating the January 6th insurrection, and that it was all set up that way, and it wasn't really the white Trump supporters that led it. Is well, we all know that's wrong, but it's human nature to scapegoat it out that way. So I think there was obviously a difference in response. The response for the January 6th should have been exactly the same as the response for the Black Lives Matter. But I don't think that, as Andy said earlier, it wasn't perceived to be a threat, and it turned out to be one of the ugliest days in our history. So yeah, there definitely was a difference. For the second part of the question, use of race by police and citizens to justify surveillance. I think this is really, to answer it truthfully and to really look into it, we have to say, okay, what came first? Was it the predominance of what we perceive as Black violence, or was it the fact that our Black communities have been put in a situation where they're more prone to police presence, and there's more desperation, and so then therefore there's more crime? So what was the cause of why we're at where we are today, that there is racial profiling, and that I spent some time in Baltimore, and I was there during the Baltimore riots, and you just didn't go into Sandtown or Winchester. You stayed away from them. But why was that the case in the first place? What happened to those communities? How did we fail as a country and as communities to get our citizens in a situation where the desperation is so high that crime, is one of, crime is a not legitimate, but is a reasonable response for some people to try to get through their day. And so I think that's really what we have to look at as a entire society is how we got there. So I think that it is an immediate problem, but I just think there's so much more culturally behind it and how we address it. And, I know there's a lot of talk now about redlining and how we go back and correct that, and how we look at these communities and say, okay, this interstate that was built through these, wonderful, vibrant communities in the 50s and 60s and destroyed them. How do we change that now? What can we do as a society to try to rebuild some of that? And there are there are communities that are eliminating some of those interstate highways. They're getting rid of them, and we've got this huge infrastructure bill that's getting ready to come out. How can we put some of that money to correcting some of these past wrongs and build the community? Because that's really, that's where all this starts, is a strong, vibrant, healthy community. So how do we get that back? I was fortunate enough to grow up in a small town that was just a very good, very strong community. But on the flip side of that, it was also a very white community. So we weren't exposed to the problems that Black and brown communities are exposed to. So it's really been an education, as I've traveled to different parts of this country, and I've worked in different communities on how we address that, and how we need to work collectively. And I really liked Ryan's comment earlier about reallocation, of resources, because that is true. $1 policing does not buy you $1 of social services. It just doesn't. So if you take $1 million out of a police force and put it in over to the social services side, that's not going to buy you what you think it's going to buy you, only because it's so much more complex, and you've got to build so much more into it. So it is looking at all of our resources and saying, well, it's not just, defunding, $1 from the police is going to give you $1 of social services or whatnot. It's not that easy of math when it comes to government finances. So, I think that's something else that's been lost. We need to look at how we build those resources back up, and how we do it in a responsible manner, so that we still have the law enforcement, and we still have the justice of the society, but also provide, what's missing. How do we address all that? I came from the Maryland Department of Health. We had 5 state psychiatric hospitals with over 1,000 patients in them. Those patients were all sent to us through the court system. They all were first interacted with by a police officer. So that's, but the state of Michigan does not have that type of a structure. So how do we build this? How do we get it to where the police aren't responding to everything that needs to be responded to?
Right. Thank you, Greg. Before we go into our next topic, we do have a question for Mr. Bauk. So Officer Bauk referenced that officers are better now than they were in the past, even the 1800s. And that statement kind of troubled me, because back then officers' role were to catch slaves. So could you elaborate on that really quick?
Gladly, and I'm sorry that upset anyone. When I said that we're better now than we were then, I'm talking about our training, our equipment, our education, our positive impact on the community. We continue to evolve and get better and better and better. I cannot imagine being a lawman back then. That's not what American policing right now stands for. So I hope that helps. Same team. Police are the community, community are the police.
Okay, thank you. Ryan, did you want to add anything to this segment?
I just wanted to add one thing off of what Greg was talking about with the construction of freeways right through communities. That happened right here in Lansing. 496 destroyed whole blocks and separated downtown Lansing from Rio Town. And I lived right next to downtown Lansing for 10 years. And it is so sad after 5 o'clock before the pandemic, how quiet Lansing gets. And I think a lot of that has to do with the building of 496, destroying those communities, or separating them. I just want to add that point.
Okay, thank you. We are going to go on to the next segment here. Thank you all for being candid and some great information. Got people chiming in. This part is gonna be basically dialogue, and so questions won't be specific to you all, but if you felt led to answer it, we're gonna just talk about the lead in empathy, democracy, and allyship. And so one of the first thing I think a lot of people are asking, why are white men so angry? Anybody?
I want to say it's privilege. One of the most insidious things about male privilege, white privilege, or just privilege in general is the inability to even know it's there. You are put on a much higher pedestal by virtue of your birth, by virtue of the amount of melanin in your skin, by your chromosomes. And growing up that way, you're not going to notice how much better you might have it than others who might be a different gender, who might be a different color than you. And you might have had a hard life or had to really struggle through it. So to be told that you are somehow, how you got to where you were wasn't by virtue of your hard work, it incites a very negative response for many people. And I don't think the news media, certain elements of the 24-hour news cycle helps this, because they will push these narratives that are so damaging to really creating a better society. So I want to throw out there that it's definitely white privilege and also how deep the news media, or those who would consider themselves newscasters, push that to anger men.
All right. Andy, I see you going towards that mute button.
It's my perspective.
Yeah.
There's a lot of angry people. And
That's what, you know what, that's what we want to hear. We need
Okay.
to hear it. Seriously, this
in my
is
20
for it. And like I said, this is a space for it to share, whether we like it or not. This is how we get to a place to where we understand whether it's whatever the situation. We need to understand what is really happening. Are our efforts being heard, Andy?
Yeah. I mean, again, I'm here. There's a 27, 28 years of police experience. There's a lot of angry people, and there's also a lot of happy people. And there's a lot of people that are happy one day and angry the next day. So, angry white men, I don't want to put a color to it. I'm going to say people. I hope everyone listening has been angry before and happy before and sad before. That spectrum of emotions, every issue, everyone reacts differently to. So, man, I know sweet old ladies and I know angry old ladies right here in my neighborhood. I know white guys that are happy and white guys that are angry. That's a tough one. There's political polarization, there's racial polarization. That's too bad. And that's not how I live my life. And there's a lot more people like me, whether they wear a badge and a gun, or if they're a school teacher, or, there's good people in this world. Anger is an emotion. I'll break out old Chief Tom Wybert, love-hate spectrum. Be somewhere in the middle. Don't hate everything. Don't love everything. Keep it real.
We have to give the megaphone to the good things, the happiness things.
Oh yeah, don't be blind to that. Don't be blind. I know you're not, Ryan. I see you smiling all the time.
Even though in my head I'm like, are you kidding me? I think what people tend to do sometimes is they compare their own anger, their own pain to others, that because I'm in pain, your pain is less.
Mm-hmm.
I think, is there Greg or Andrew earlier talked about empathy, and we have to train people in empathy better than we do nowadays. Because that angry white men is very real for many people, and it's insidious.
And let me just put this out here, Greg, I want you to chime in, but I have to be honest and candid on the videos and the flyer that I put out. Every day there were, at least the Facebook post, it was so many nasty things from white males. It was unbelievable. And so I'm like, okay, well, let's find out where the anger, and some of it was mainly just having this forum is stupid, is, you know, it doesn't make any sense. And so I'm like, okay, well, we still have to find out what the root of the anger was, something like this. So I think that was a good question. A lot of people wanted to answer that. And so again, the purpose of the forum is to find out, and then let's find ways to where we can, you know, have empathy and kind of move on to a better place. So that's really, you know, the reason why the question was, is to find out, because you find out why you're angry and let's deal with it. Let's deal with it. We can't, you know, keep putting it up under the rug. So again, so Greg, did you want to chime in before we go anywhere?
Yeah, I would just say, you know, if you back to Ryan's point of the 24-hour news service and also social media, it's really easy to be pissed off on social media and to make your views known, and to do it a lot of times anonymously, and to be incredibly hateful. And I think we see a lot of that. And, you know, why are white men angry? Well, you know, there's also a lot of, you know, when you look at the, you know, Make America Great Again movement, and you look at, you know, a lot of the makeup of that, you know, there were a lot of, you know, lower to middle class, you know, white men, white women. So, and, you know, a lot of them did not have the opportunities that their parents had. I mean, if you look at even, you know, our area with regard to factory work, it used to be, you know, factory work was a great way to be upwardly mobile and to get in and get that job without the college education. And quite, you know, and honestly, you know, this country's moved away from a lot of that. It's moved away from the investment it needs to make in research and development, which is another, I think, a really good thing coming out of the Biden administration, is investing in some of that to really, you know, provide opportunities for our economy to grow more than just on the information, the technology side, which only, you know, benefits a certain segment of the population. And also, you know, let's face it, there's been a lot of change over the last, you know, 10, 20 years where, you know, I will use my lovely, wonderful parents as an example. My mom cannot understand why we have to call people they and them now. She can, you know, she cannot understand a lot of this. So there's just this huge cultural change. There's legal marijuana, there's gay marriage, there's a lot of things that, you know, a lot of, you know, older, more traditional white people and families, they just don't understand that. So I think we've come a long way as a country, but that's also a lot of culture shock for a lot of people that leaves them very confused.
Right. Thank you. Thank you so much. Our time is winding down, so I do want to ask one more question, then we'll get to the move. Allyship is crucial in the fight for social justice. How would you explain allyship?
Who's up, me?
Yep, go for it.
Empathy, listen, communicate. We're all in this together.
Mhm.
I'm here. All the people on this panel are here. We really are all in this together. It's I'm still hung up on it because you got a bunch of white guys on the panel. It's a bad thing. That's like
you feel it inside. It's like, oh, are we offensive by just having white men on here?
Yeah, come on.
Every time I saw that flyer, that was where my brain went automatically.
Yeah, let's be better than that. We're all better than that, regardless of your skin color. But allyship, I'm here. I'm a giver, not a taker, a helper, not a herder. And there's a lot of men and women in law enforcement just like me. So talk to us, listen to us. We'll do the same. It's what we do. And to build that police legitimacy, that public trust takes, you know, we have a role in that. It takes a lot. There's non-enforcement context. It's getting out of the car. It's getting to know your neighborhood and who lives in it. Everybody out there, I don't care who you are, you need law enforcement in your community. Now more than ever, you need us, because again, we're the givers, not the takers, the helpers, not. I see closed doors, the people behind the blinds, the ones in the middle that aren't angry and aren't happy. You need us and we need you. Step forward, be a responsible citizen in your community, and law enforcement will be your partner and ally.
I would also add for allyship, it's even smaller items like the off-color joke that your grandparent makes, or a quote that they seem to use all the time, and so you adopted it yourself. And an ally is someone who takes them into a private space and says, "Hey, just want to let you know where that quote came from."
Mhm.
I'll say an example of my own. My grandmother, who I love dearly, used to use the phrase, "Sometimes you have to call a spade a spade."
Mm.
Oh, okay. We're referring to garden tools. Okay. It was years and years and years I would hear that phrase. And it wasn't until law school that a friend pulled me aside and said, "Ryan, you put something on Facebook and we need to have a conversation about it."
Mm.
And being an ally is not being silent when it's tough.
Mhm.
It's very easy to do nothing. It takes a lot more work to do something, and doing something is being an ally.
Wow, that's powerful. How about you, Greg?
What Ryan said. How can I do any better than that? So I'm not even going to try.
Okay.
I'm just
Okay.
going to second that.
You're gonna ditto. Okay. All right. Wind it down here. Final question. And basically, how can we compel others to become active allies? And how can we move from conversation to action? I'll start with you, Ryan.
Oh, me?
Yeah.
I think is we have so much going on in the world right now, and it is so unfortunate all the terrible things that are happening in the world with respect to race relations, police violence, everything that happened last summer. But you see the country and the world tilting to other topics.
Mhm. Right.
For many, many people, the reason for that is because having these conversations are uncomfortable. I'm a Midwesterner, and we always want to make everyone feel comfortable, and we don't want to cause conflict. I think continuing having these conversations, even at home, especially at home with our kids and our high schoolers, our college students, that is really, I think, where you'll start seeing the needle change. Our up and coming generation, our millennials, they're loud, and they're going to get even louder as they take up more of the population. So I think it's continuing to have these conversations even after it's out of the news cycle,
Mhm.
to show that we're serious. And I think action will spring out of that, because it's very easy to ignore something you don't hear. But being
Mm.
loud,
Yeah.
eventually something will change.
You're putting out some nuggets here. We got people actually tweeting those. All right.
I'm a walking thesaurus sometimes, so I'll
Yeah,
throw out some good nuggets for you.
that's another topic. Greg.
Yeah, I would build on what Ryan said and about having the conversations at home. I would encourage us to listen to our kids, because it's really through our kids who, I've got a 22 and an almost 19-year-old, and, they bring things home, and they bring a perspective that's a lot more culturally diverse than what I grew up in. So, they're the generation that are that lead us into changing a lot of the things. And I apologize for that sunlight on my face. A lot of the things that we need to change. It's, listening to them and understanding their perspective, which is different than what we grew up with. And it has to be different because of the community and the culture that they live in, which is a good thing. So I think that's really the key is, making sure that we're having the conversation as much as we can, but we're also getting involved. We're having meetings like this, I'm not lying when I say when I came to Ingham County, I got a lot more involved in diversity and equity because it was available to me, and it was not available to me where I was before. And so I think that's it's the Ingham County Cultural Diversity and Equity and Inclusion Task Force. It's those kind of things. It's getting out in the community and really getting involved in having those conversations. It's the one thing I've learned from you guys is it's okay to step in it every once in a while with what we say, because that's the only way we're going to learn. So
Thank you, Greg. Andy.
All right, I said it before, I'll say it again. Unify, don't divide. All right, communicate, listen, be empathetic. Time for a quick history lesson. I'm a student of history, okay? You're gonna know who said this if you know some history. 7 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a nation conceived in liberty and dedicated the proposition that all men and women are created equal. That's Abraham Lincoln. We fought a war over slavery, the Civil War, okay? All men are created equal is what President Abraham Lincoln says. Who said this? I still have a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. One day this nation will rise up and live up to its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident and all men are created equal. I have a dream. Dr. Martin Luther King. We're at a point in our country where it's time to see that, to see all men and women created equal, to live Dr. King's dream. And we're all going to play a role in that, but we're not going to play a role on that if we pick a side.
Right.
We got to unify, not divide. We got to communicate. We got to listen. We have to be empathetic to the other opinions, just like we're doing here tonight. Just like we're doing here tonight. I'm not picking sides. I'm going to play a role in this. I challenge each and every one of you to play a role in this as well. Thank you for the opportunity, Kim.
Thank you. We are a little past 8, but I'm telling you, I don't want to say anything other than what's been said already. Just thank all of our viewers. Thank you all again for being a part of something great, the continued conversation. These are tough topics. Without you all, we cannot continue to move towards progress. And I do want the public to know that each one of these gentlemen tonight are heavily involved in Ingham County Cultural Diversity Committee, funding, writing policies and procedures. A safe space program is being launched out, training, money that's going. So we're just not on here tonight. We are actually, doing some things. So part of tonight is just to kind of display some of the things that are happening through Ingham County. So we thank everyone for joining on tonight. Thank you, Greg, for being a part. Thank all of our listeners. Have a good night.